Star Wars Battlefront 2, the upcoming remake sequel, I'm gonna call it that, of the classic series that everyone is saying it's gonna be the greatest game of all time. It's gonna fix everything that was wrong with Star Wars Battlefront back in 2015, and there can't be anything wrong with it because they listened to the community. Well, let's have a little talk about that, and why I think that even though we've got things like every era, and space battles, and droids, you know, droids are cool. They're from the shows and the movies that I saw when I was growing up, because I grew up with Star Wars, the special editions, and, you know, Star Wars and the Clone Wars and Jango Fett, they're all things that I want. That's great, that's awesome, and I think that the game is going to be better because it has extra content in it that the original version was lacking back in 2015, but there are things in Star Wars Battlefront that need to be fixed that I don't have evidence of right now. Now, granted, I have not seen any gameplay of the game yet. We've seen in-engine footage, some cutscenes, and some story trailers, and some promises and concept art, but they're doing the same thing they did when the original Battlefront was announced back in 2015, and that is not let us see any gameplay for a couple months after they officially release it to ride the hype train and everything, and that's a problem. I've been covering Shadow of War a lot lately, and something that I've been praising that game for is actually showing us gameplay right after they announced it, like a couple weeks, and Battlefront 2 might do that. There's nothing saying that they're not going to do that, but if it's anything like the last game and the marketing campaign for that one, we're probably not going to see any, and that's going to make me very skeptical that they're going to fix some core things they need to get fixed from the last game. Things like having offline modes for the multiplayer. I get it. Campaigns are great. I'm actually interested in the campaign. I think the storyline sounds really cool. It adds more to the Star Wars universe that we've never seen before, but I also really want my old classic Battlefront experience back, and that's not something we got the last go-around. And a big part of that is offline modes being the same as the online mode. So if I could play every multiplayer map and every single mode with AI, because sometimes I don't want to play online with other people, or I want to do a co-op session or some LAN party stuff, that's what I feel like a lot of people who played the games when they were younger really enjoyed about it. When I was a kid, I never had internet even at that point because I lived in a very rural part of Canada, but I could have friends over and we could just mow down thousands upon thousands of stormtroopers or droids or clones or rebels and feel like a total badass. It was a great way to spend my weekends in the morning and the afternoon, just doing that when there was no one else around even, or when I did have friends over. So that's something that I really want to see in Battlefront 2, and I'm really hoping that they do put that in there. They started to with 2015's Battlefront. They gave us the Walker Assault mode, but that was only a single player mode for the original vanilla maps in Walker Assault, and honestly, when those were put in, that was the most fun I had playing Star Wars Battlefront because it felt like the original games again. And I was very disappointed when DICE said that they weren't going to be making any other offline modes akin to that, because what it did was it made it have even less content in it, even a year and a half afterwards. There are certain game modes and multiplayer modes in the 2015 version that don't have anyone playing them, and that's a big problem because now you've lost that entire part of the game. You can't play specific game modes in it anymore, whether you're online or offline. And in the first one, they tried to do a very band-aid fix by giving you those co-op modes that were absolutely terrible. They gave you some little battle modes that really featured you running around a map and then killing everyone, and for the most part, waiting for those guys to respawn, and then you'd have like a little 2 to 10 second fight, and then wait for them to respawn once again. It wasn't a big epic battle, and it didn't make you feel like you were having fun in the game at all. And look, having as many errors as possible, that's always a good thing. That's extra content and extra stuff. But before they did that, and I've been saying this for months now, they need to fix the core mechanics. That is things like offline game modes, as well as changing even the online multiplayer, because it felt very one-sided towards specific factions. it got very boring because there wasn't a whole lot to do in the game after you had played it for roughly 4 hours. You couldn't get into different varieties of vehicles. There were pretty much AT-STs and AT-ATs available, with some speeder bikes that you would drive and then crash into a tree. There was no point in having those in the game, which isn't a big stretch from the original, don't get me wrong. But in the original, we at least had some different ways of dealing with vehicles and things that didn't rely on power-ups and pickups in the map as well. If they could increase the flying fidelity, make that a whole lot nicer to do, and make dogfights feel less one-sided if you get a hero character in them, that'd always be really nice as well. Now, one thing that I'm very happy about is that they're actually foregoing a season pass for the game, so you're not going to be able to pay up front for all the map DLC and everything. I don't know what shape and form that's going to take to replace it, but it's really good to hear because there was a huge problem with the 2015 version where they did segment the player base, and that's what the director from DICE that talked about this was actually saying they don't want to do that again, because you did run into a big problem, especially on the PC side, where there was no one playing with all the DLC or on specific DLC. So you had like this 3,000 player base in total where they were all playing on different maps. And if you split them up like that, then you can end up in situations where there's maybe 500 people playing with certain DLC enabled and the rest aren't, or they have different amounts of DLC that they've bought or anything like that. So you end up in situations where you can't play with certain game modes because out of 500 people, there's only 3 of them trying to play Capture the Droid or whatever other game mode that might not be quite as popular. And again, that goes back to having offline modes in case something like that ever happens, because there was a lot of modes in 2015's Battlefront that weren't being played at all, and some of them were actually kind of fun, or they would have been nice to hop into for just a few minutes or a round or two just to either warm up or if you had a bit of time to kill. So having that available offline really increases the amount of content you have in the game, because even if, say, 5 to 8 years or 10 years even down the line, you want to go back to the game, you can still play it. And that's what we see with the original games as well. Of course, you can still do multiplayer in Battlefront 2 with whatever other service that is, but most people, when they go back and play that game, they're just going to go and play it offline because, you know, that's still a perfectly acceptable and fun thing to play. So I think overall, right now, I'm a little bit more optimistic than I thought I was going to be entirely frank. Although, I still believe that until we see gameplay of this video game, and in-engine footage is not the same thing, then we need to take everything that DICE and EA say with a grain of salt, because you don't know what they're adding in, what they're potentially taking out, or how far they're going to make it a sequel rather than something to tie into The Last Jedi or any other movie that comes out, like the Han Solo movie next year and everything like that. Until we see gameplay, until you see any sort of confirmation that there's more changes other than saying, oh, here's the same game, but you get to play as a clone or as a droid, it doesn't fix the core problem that was in the first game. Any problem that you had, look for evidence that they're fixing that, or look for evidence that they're doing things to alleviate something to make a game more enjoyable for you, rather than focusing on having eras, because it's all good to overhaul what a game looks like and what character models and voice lines are in a game, but if you still have those core problems, it's not going to make your experience any better. But I am happy that I can play on Camino again. That sounds pretty fun. The Frostbite engine, of course, looks amazing. I just hope that there's more content on launch this time. The no season pass thing is definitely a positive, definitely a plus, and I'm looking forward to seeing what type of DLC they do. Because I've been saying this for a while too, that Battlefront and Star Wars as a universe is the perfect IP to have your DLC be skin packs or anything like that. Like if you want your Stormtrooper to be a Death Trooper or something, you could pay like $1 or maybe some in-game currency to get it. In the first game, you had to level up to, say, level 48 to 50 to get any of the good skins. But if you could just like pay $1 to get them, if you really wanted to, that'd be perfect. I think they would rake in a ton of cash because people are connected to the Star Wars franchise. They're connected to the universe. They want to look like a badass, And if you give them the option to do that and maybe spend a couple bucks if they want to, instead of making them spend money on maps that will then segregate the community, it's going to be a net positive for you. And it's also going to potentially increase the lifespan of the game, and it will make it feel less pay to win, and it'll make it feel less greedy overall. So yeah, EA, DICE, whatever, go crazy with the skins. If you guys gotta have some DLC model or microtransactions in your game that like you're required to have in there, just do that. It doesn't affect anyone in the game other than what they look like, so I can't really complain about that. Anyways, those are my further thoughts on Star Wars Battlefront 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you looking forward to it? And is there any other stuff that I missed news-wise or anything like that? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me, 2 different ways you can do that. VidMe, leave a tip on there. Or if you want to support my Patreon, a link to that in the description. I am PattyJack. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day.